The March sky hovered between rain and snow, as if the weather couldn't choose a language for grief. At the cemetery in Providence, the priest's voice thinned out against the wind, and the folding chairs clicked shut one by one, like small verdicts. I stood by Iris's casket with my hands inside my coat, not for warmth but to keep them from shaking. People spoke to me in low currents, neighbors, a cousin I barely recognized, yet everything broke apart before it reached meaning. Jonah stood a couple of steps away, taller than me now, jaw locked, hair damp at the temples. The way he stared at the ground felt like a closed door. I didn't ask him to open it. The last shovelful of earth landed with a hollow, final sound I knew I'd hear again at night. There was something else I heard, an older sound, wind through dry grass on land far from here. Iris's land, not the patch that now covered her, but 100 and some acres of New Mexico. Juniper scrub, a tired windmill, a cottonwood anchored by a trickling arroyo. The deed sits in my name. She insisted on that years ago. After the funeral, I didn't tell Jonah about it. I told myself he wouldn't understand. Maybe I needed him not to. We drove back to my house in Pawtucket without the radio. Traffic blurred against the wet windows. Jonah's reflection rose and fell with the streetlights. I kept trying to pull words off a ledge inside my mouth. There's something your mother left. But every time the words took a step, I imagined his face folding into suspicion, or that flat, hard look he learned when he was 12. At home, the air smelled like lilies, like a store trying to sell me comfort. I made tea, forgot about it, watched steam die. Jonah stood in the kitchen doorway, hands in his pockets. "You good?" he asked without inflection. "I'm here," I said. He nodded, as if that were all I had to contribute. He slept in the old guest room Iris used to paint in. I lay awake listening to the house creak, to the refrigerator's stubborn hum, to my own breathing. In the drawer of her nightstand, there's a brass compass with her initials scratched on the lid, i.e. Iris Emery, its needle trembling even when the world is still. I opened it and watched the red tip find north, then closed to silence again. I didn't tell him about the land. Not yet. Not while he still mistook my quiet for withholding, and perhaps he wasn't wrong. The truth has a weight. Sometimes you pretend you're protecting someone when you're only bracing your own ribs. The morning after, the house had that after-funeral stillness. Flowers crowding the dining table, casseroles labeled in other people's handwriting, chairs slightly out of place as if they remembered bodies. Jonah left early to pick up a suit from the cleaners he'd forgotten to return. He didn't offer to bring me coffee, I didn't ask. I made my way to Iris's studio. The windows looked east, pale light gathering on the sill where she kept a row of small stones shaped like broken hearts. The easel stood empty. Her last canvas leaned against the wall, just underpainted blues, a horizon she never finished. I sat on the stool, the cushion flattened by years of her weight. In the top drawer of the flat file, beneath watercolor pads and a tin of warped pencils, I found the long envelope with my name. "For the land," she'd written in the corner. The handwriting was thinner than it used to be, as if each letter had to be negotiated. There was a folded map creased at the corners from hands I know, and a letter. I read it slowly, mouth moving over each word like a prayer. "Keep it quiet if you need to," she wrote. Not because Jonah can't be trusted, but because grief turns language into knives. When he is ready, he will ask without knowing what he's asking for. Take him to the cottonwood. Tell him the other name we gave to the wind. Don't sell, not yet. Wait for the right use. The right use. Iris loved making things hold two meanings. A field as a room, a bench as a confession. The compass lay near my elbow. I thumbed its lid open and closed until the click started to sound like a heartbeat. I folded the letter back and kept it in my pocket. Jonah's footsteps came down the hall. "Dad?" His voice held that careful tone he uses when he's trying to sound gentle and not condescending. "The lawyer emailed me about probate, said we should inventory everything." "Everything?" I echoed. "Bank accounts, the Tacoma, the studio equipment, any property?" "Right," I said, feeling the letter through my pants. My jaw tightened. "We'll sort it out." He leaned against the doorframe, eyes going to the easel, then away. "Do you need me to stay here a few days?" He was asking if I needed him. It arrived dressed as logistics. "I'll be okay," I said, then hated myself for saying it. He nodded. We both pretended it was kindness. When he left for lunch with an old friend, I unfolded the map again. There was the little rectangle she'd circled in red pencil, the shack near the arroyo, the cottonwood drawn with 4 careful lines, a small X at the place where the windmill groaned. I traced the ridge with my finger until I could feel the heat of that place in my skin. I booked a flight to Albuquerque. I didn't tell Jonah. The screen asked if I wanted to add travel protection. I thought about the word. Protection from what? From being the man I have been for too long? I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet, listening to the compass needle twitch. New Mexico greeted me with light. Not the hesitant gray of our coast, but a clean, unwavering brightness that made every edge sharper. I rented a truck in Albuquerque and drove north, the freeway giving way to 2-lane roads lined with scrub and the occasional billboard offering miracles. The radio found a station where a woman sang in Spanish about a man who left and never learned how to come back. At the county office in Taos, the clerk stamped my copy of the deed without looking up, her nails the color of rust. "Taxes are current," she said. "Your wife took care of it. Sorry for your loss." The last sentence sounded practiced, but I held it anyway. The land lay a few miles beyond a town barely stitched together. Gas station, feed store, a diner with a sighing sign. The track to the property was rutted. Sagebrush reached out like it wanted to count me. When I killed the engine, the quiet had a body. The windmill turned slow, squeaking in a rhythm that used to lull Iris to sleep. The shack sagged in the middle, roof patched with sheet metal. Iris and I painted these boards once, our laughter caught under the eaves with swallows' nests. I could still see her hair in the sun, the way she held the compass flat in her palm and named the directions like old friends. North, she'd tell me, isn't a place, it's a choice repeated. The cottonwood stood where the arroyo curved, leaves talking to themselves. I walked down the sandy bank and touched its bark. The heat from the trunk surprised me. I kneeled and pressed my ear to it. Water moved faintly somewhere inside, stubborn as forgiveness. There was an old coffee can half buried near the roots, the lid rusted into colored lace. I pried it open with my keys. Inside, wrapped in wax paper, was another note. "If you've made it this far," Iris had written, "you've already chosen something brave. There's a tin box under the plank beside the south wall. Take it home. Wait until Jonah's breathing slows when he sleeps. Then open it." I stayed until the sun slid toward its red self. Coyotes began their rehearsal. On the drive back, my phone found a signal long enough to display a text from Jonah. "How are you?" I typed. "The light is... it's a lot." Then deleted it. I wrote, "I'm okay." Sent that. At the shack, I found the plank and the box beneath it. A weathered tin with a penny glued to the top, maybe for luck. I put it on the passenger seat, the hinge cold against my wrist, and drove toward a dim hotel with a buzzing sign. I placed the compass on the nightstand and watched the needle settle, the way people do when they trust the bed to hold them. I didn't sleep. I listened to trucks on the highway and thought about what Iris meant by the other name for the wind. I wondered if Jonah could hear this same wind inside whatever room he was in, if grief had taught him to put a hand on his own chest and wait for the lift. By the time I flew back to Rhode Island, the lilies in the dining room had gone sour. I opened the windows to let February and whatever else in. The tin box sat on Iris's side of the bed, heavy as if it contained a gravity I couldn't manage alone. Jonah came over with takeout and papers from the lawyer. He spread them on the table with the efficiency of someone who wants the meeting to end before it starts. "Okay," he said, tapping a checklist. "Bank accounts, car title, household assets. There's also a question about real property. I know the house is in both your names. Is there anything else?" The question hovered between us. I saw Iris's handwriting in my mind. I saw the cottonwood's bark, a map's red circle, the word, "wait." "No," I said, and felt it land. "Just the house." Jonah didn't look satisfied or betrayed. He simply checked a box. Sometimes that's worse. I watched him eat in small, efficient bites, eyes on the form, pen poised. "How are you?" I asked. "Productive," he said. "Helps." "I'm flying out next week," I lied again, the lie changing clothes. "Client in Cleveland, couple of days." "Right," he said, expression unreadable. "I can look after the place." "You don't have to." He shrugged. "I'll be around." It came off as indifference, which I think he meant as mercy. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the tin. Inside was a folded piece of muslin tied with blue thread. The smell that came up was dust and old paper, a whisper of something sweet Iris once wore. Under the cloth lay a stack of photographs. Us on the porch of the shack, Iris in a sundress holding up the compass to her eye as if it were a monocle, the cottonwood just a sapling. There was also a hospital bracelet, brittle with time, the letters nearly gone. A smaller envelope rested at the bottom, addressed to Jonah in Iris's hand. I placed the envelope back in the box and closed the lid. My chest felt crowded. That night, I dreamed of the arroyo running full. When I woke up, I was already crying quietly, as if I were apologizing for it. I pressed the heel of my hand against my sternum, told myself to breathe. I brewed coffee, bitter and too strong, and stared at the envelope, knowing what it was or close enough. The reason she put the land in my name, the thing we never spoke aloud after that one night in Taos when the wind turned mean and we drove to a hospital with the headlights off because the bulbs blew out on the road, and all we had was the moon. Some losses are so precise, they cut words to ribbons. I texted Jonah. "I need help restocking the basement shelves. Saturday." He said, "Sure." I needed him in the house even if we didn't talk. I needed to hear his footsteps and practice telling the truth until the truth could hear itself coming. We spent Saturday moving boxes of paint cans and tools in the basement, each of us orbiting the other like cautious planets. The furnace coughed, the concrete held the day's cold. Jonah found the old camping stove and smiled a little despite himself. "You still have this," he said. "I kept it for her," I answered before I could turn the words into something gentler. The her hung in the air as a presence, not a ghost. He slid the box back onto the shelf. "She'd camp out in the studio sometimes, said it kept the paint honest." "She said a lot of things to keep me from worrying," I replied. "We worked until our backs complained." When we came upstairs, I made grilled cheese that was more butter than bread. We ate at the counter. I watched his face in the stainless steel reflection of the kettle, warped and young. "I'm going to New Mexico," I said finally. The words surprised both of us with their shape in the room. He frowned. "Since when do you— New Mexico?" Iris had— She had a place out there, land. We used to go before things got busy. I cleared my throat. "It's in my name." He set his sandwich down. "And you didn't think to mention it?" "I didn't know how." "Try me," he said, not unkindly, and that made it worse. "It's complicated," I offered, which is what men say when they are afraid. He stared at the counter a long time, then nodded, a single concession. "Okay," he said, "you go. Figure out whatever you need to figure out." He didn't ask if the land was worth money. Maybe he didn't want to be that person. Maybe he trusted me to be that person for him. After he left, I packed a bag, work gloves, the compass, the tin box. I tucked Iris's envelope for Jonah inside, and then at the last second took it back out. I placed it beneath the compass on the nightstand and stood there until my legs ached. The house made a small sound, wood adjusting to the air. Before dawn, I drove to the airport with the road to myself. In the silence, I tried Iris's phrase on my tongue, the other name for the wind. I said it aloud, and the windshield filmed with breath, as if the car were nodding along. The land hadn't changed. Or maybe it had, and it was me that recognized the changes as belonging to it. The windmill's complaint was softer, the cottonwood taller, its shade a real offer now. I wore Iris's denim jacket, stiff at the seams, the cuffs smelling faintly of turpentine and lavender. I sat under the cottonwood and spread the photographs on my lap. The hospital bracelet lay beside my knee, letters faded to a ghost. I said the name we never registered, the one we whispered into the dark that night. May. We buried the name under a cairn of 5 flat stones by the roots and told no one. Shame is a lonely gardener. It grows things you don't mean to plant. Iris's letter to Jonah felt warm from the sun by the time I opened the tin again. I didn't read it. Not yet. Part of me feared that her words would ask something I couldn't do. Another part feared they wouldn't ask enough. On the second day, I walked the fence line. A neighbor from a quarter-mile down, the kind of neighbor who knows your truck by sound, pulled up in an old Ford. Her name was Maeve, hair white, face carved in kind ways. "You the husband," she said, not a question. "I am." "She loved this patch of stubborn," Maeve went on. "Came out here last summer looking thin but bright. Planted wildflower seed by the arroyo. Said she was making a promise." "What kind of promise?" I asked. Maeve removed her hat, looked at the cottonwood. "The kind you can't keep alone." After she left, I sat with that sentence until the light failed. The wind pushed along the arroyo, and I remembered Iris's other name for it, Vara. She said the wind's name was Vara because it measured us. How far, how thin, how much. The compass needle trembled against the glass like a moth. At dusk, I called Jonah. "Wish you were here," I said. "Do you?" he asked, not mocking, just checking. "I do," I said. I almost told him about the cairn, about May, but I wanted to tell him where the ground can hold him while he heard it. Over the phone, the words might rattle loose and cut. He was quiet a moment. "Send me a picture," he said. I took one of the cottonwood, the hill behind it pink with the last light. I didn't include the stones. On the third day, smoke streaked the horizon. A prescribed burn on government land had wandered, the way control does. I kept checking the sky, nostrils stinging. The ranger who stopped by said we were not in the line of it yet, but yet was doing a lot of work. I cleared brush around the shack, sweat turning the jacket heavy. Iris and I had done this every spring, talking in a shorthand of gestures, her hand on my shoulder when my back twinged, my finger to my lips when a hawk floated close. I worked until my palms sizzled and the world narrowed to the scrape of limbs on dirt. That night I dreamed that fire walked the fence like a slow inspector and asked me questions I couldn't answer. I woke to ashes floating like dull snow. Shoulder-high grass hissed. The wind, Vara, pressed its hand to my chest. Secrets don't burn clean. They leave a film, a smell. I held the envelope to my nose. It didn't smell like smoke. It smelled like Iris's drawer, where she kept things for later. I called Jonah again. He picked up on the third ring. "There's a fire?" he said. "I saw something online. West of us, we're okay." "We." I corrected. "Habit." He exhaled into the phone. I could imagine his apartment's light, too blue, too polite. "When are you coming back?" "Soon," I said, which is not a date. "I want to bring you here." Silence clicked. "If this is about money," he said finally, "I don't—" "It isn't," I cut in, too quick. "It's about your mother. That's always about money," he said softly. And I remembered a winter of bills, the way Iris sold her violin to pay property tax we didn't want to admit existed. I hadn't told Jonah that either. He'd been in college then, stretched thin. We had rationed truths like heat. "I'll explain," I said. "Okay," he replied, but the okay had splinters. After the call, I packed the photos and the bracelet back into the tin and wrapped it again. I slid the envelope into the inside pocket of my jacket, where it warmed against me as if it were a small living thing. Then I sat outside while the smoke reddened the moon and the wind counted us in a language I was finally trying to learn. I landed back in Providence on a Monday that didn't feel like any particular season. When I walked into the house, Jonah was sitting at the kitchen table with the probate folder open and a stack of envelopes beside him. His eyes were tired, but his posture was alert in a way that made my stomach drop. "What's this?" he asked, sliding an envelope across the table. It was a property tax statement from Taos County, Iris's name crossed out, mine printed above. "You went through her files," I said, more accusation than question. "I went through the file the lawyer told me to inventory," he answered, steady. "You told me there was no other property." I closed my eyes. I was wrong. "You lied," he corrected. The word hung like a bell. I sat down. The compass in my pocket pressed into my thigh the way regret does. "Yes." He looked past me to the studio door. "How long have you known?" "Years," I said. "We bought it before you turned 10. He laughed once, short and ugly. "So all those summers we couldn't take a trip because money's tight. You were paying for a secret." "It wasn't a secret," I said, then heard myself. "It was not for sale." "Everything is for sale when the person you love is dying," he shot back, and there was the burn line bright and hot. "You could have told me. I'm not a thief." "I didn't say you were." "You acted like I'd steal it," he said, voice shaking now, grief breaking the hard shell around it. "Like I'd trade her for acreage." "I was trying to protect," I started. "Yourself," he finished. Then he stood up, pushing the chair back with his thigh, hands shaking, eyes bright with the anger that comes to stand in for sorrow when sorrow is too much. "I don't want anything from you," he said, and left. After the door closed, the house made a sound like old wood settling, or like a person exhaling after a long hold. I sat alone, the tax envelope on the table between my hands, the ink smudged where his thumb must have rested. The compass needle hovered and quivered under the glass in my pocket, trying to locate something that refused to be true or false. I placed Iris's letter for him on the table, then moved it, then returned it. I sent him a text. "There's a letter from your mother, whenever you want." No reply. The lilies were finally dead. I threw them away. Days passed unevenly. The house shrank and then grew depending on where I stood. I worked out of habit, answering emails I could have ignored, sweeping floors that didn't need it. At night, I took the letter out and read Iris's handwriting on the envelope. "For Jonah, when the wind is listening." I went to see Maeve on a video call, the neighbor from Taos who'd given me her number in case I forgot how to be a person about this place. Her face filled the screen, sunshine cross-hatching the wrinkles like a map. "He found out," I said. "Of course he did," she replied. "Grief has good aim." "I wanted to wait until, I don't know." I rubbed my temple. "There's a bracelet. From the hospital, we never told him." Maeve's eyes softened. "Carry it right. Names don't ruin a life. Silence does." That night, Jonah let himself in. His key sounded like apology in the lock. He didn't come to the kitchen. I found him in the studio, standing by the window, eyes on some middle distance. "I'm sorry," I said, and it didn't feel like enough, but it was what I had. "Why the land?" he asked, voice even. "Why in your name? Why not tell me?" I handed him the envelope. He didn't take it. "Tell me first," he said. So I did. I told him about Taos in a different decade, about the wind and the moon, and an emergency room lit like it was trying not to wake anybody. I told him we named her May, after a month that never arrived for us, after a grandmother I never met. I told him we took the bracelet because we needed to carry proof that it wasn't a dream, that we had held more than absence. I told him the compass helped us walk back to the shack without talking, and how never talking became a kind of habit after. I miscounted the stones when I told him about the cairn. He corrected me. 5, he said. He'd seen the picture. Later, he admitted he zoomed in, looking for whatever I refused to name. "We put the land in my name because I promised Iris I'd keep it unruined until it had a purpose," I said. "She knew I would fold if you looked at me with need. She asked me not to. Not until you'd heard the wind." He took the envelope then. He didn't open it. He pressed it flat against his chest like it could jumpstart something. We stood there in the studio with paint ghosts and stale lilies gone to the trash, breathing. "I'm not a child," he said, softer. "I know," I said. "I don't know how to be a father to a man who already made himself without me." He gave me a look I couldn't untie. "Maybe start by telling me the truth before it's neat." We flew out 2 mornings later. He sat by the window, elbows tucked in, the way he did as a boy when he thought the plane's balance depended on him. We didn't talk much. I showed him pictures on my phone of the cottonwood, the shack, the windmill's rusted vanes. He studied them like they might refuse to hold still. The rental truck smelled like sun-baked vinyl. As we turned off the paved road, the land rose to meet us with its particular plainness. "It's bigger than it looks," Jonah said finally, shading his eyes with his hand. It's not the acres, I said. It's the air between them. We parked by the shack. He stood at the threshold, head tilted, as if listening for the old conversations that had seeped into the wood. He ran a finger along a weathered board and lifted it to his nose. Turpentine, he said, and dirt. Your mother called it red memory, I said, stains that don't apologize. We walked to the cottonwood without speaking. The wind moved steadily east, a constant measure. I put my hand on the trunk. Jonah watched my fingers as if learning a gesture. This is where, I said, then stopped. I wanted the story to come gentle. I wanted it not to be a weapon. The wind, Vara, pushed and pushed. I told him, plain. He didn't look away. When I finished, he sat down on the sand and placed both hands flat on the ground like he was meeting it, like he was giving it his weight. He didn't cry. His eyes reddened and then cleared. What was her other name for wind? He asked. Vara, I said. Like a measuring stick. The wind that comes through here counts things, she said. Distance, desire, how long you can stand being honest. And the purpose, he said, eyes on the horizon. You said she was waiting for one. I shrugged. She thought she'd know it when she heard it. He nodded, took the envelope out of his jacket and opened it. He read standing, then sitting, then leaning his back against the cottonwood. The paper shook once, then steadied. When he handed it to me, his face had changed a little, as if something behind it had moved a chair. She wants a place for what people can't say, he said quietly. Workshops, retreats. A day where folks bring what they can't name and leave without it needing to be solved. That sounds like her, I said, my throat a knot. She says you'll try to turn it into a plan with bullet points, he added, mouth twitching. Don't. I laughed and heard a small sound in my own voice I hadn't recognized, that beginning of relief that doesn't announce itself. We sat there until the sun slid down and the cottonwood shadow stretched longer than us. Jonah built a cairn beside ours, a sixth stone laid carefully. Not for another person, he said when I asked with my face, for what we didn't say. We met Maeve the next morning at the fence. She carried a thermos and the air of someone who would listen without making you perform grief. Jonah shook her hand, eyes squinting against the light. You look like her around the eyes, Maeve told him. He didn't know what to do with the sentence and put it in his pocket. She told us about last summer, how Iris came alone with a small case and a jar of seeds. She stood right there, Maeve said, pointing toward the arroyo, and played the wind something old. Then she poured out the seeds and said, for whoever needs to find color when all they have is air. Played? Jonah asked, startled. Mom sold her violin years ago. Bought another, Maeve said gently. Cheap thing with a beautiful scar on its back. She sold that one too before the taxes came due. Told me it felt right to trade sound for place. Maeve looked at me when she said it, kind but firm. Jonah turned to me slowly. Taxes. I nodded. She didn't want to worry you. He kicked at the dirt, then stopped himself. I wasn't a child. No, I said. You were the person we wanted to protect, which sometimes is a word we use when we're scared to ask for help. We walked the property, Maeve pointing out where wildflowers would lift if rain cooperated. Jonah asked practical questions that surprised me. Water rights, access road, liability. He was looking for a way to stand inside Iris's idea that didn't collapse under scrutiny. At the cottonwood, he placed his palm on the trunk and closed his eyes. He stood that way a long time. When he stepped back, I saw the wet outline of his hand on the bark. It faded quickly, absorbed. On the drive to town for groceries, he said, I don't forgive you yet. His voice was not cruel. It was a statement of orientation. I don't deserve it yet, I answered. He watched the line of road that met and met us again. But I'm not leaving. Good, I said, and meant the word in every direction. We spent the next days building small, ordinary things. We repaired a step that sagged. We patched a hole with a piece of tin that had embossed letters from another life. Jonah found a box of screws Iris had labeled stubborn and shook it like a rattle before using them. He drew in a notebook after dinner, pages filling with lines that looked like wind made visible. I didn't ask to see. He slid the book toward me anyway. "It's nothing," he said, which is what artists say when something is new and unprotected. "It's the wind," I said. "It's the way it measures," he corrected, and I loved him fiercely for that. At night we sat outside with the compass on the table between us. The needle trembled as if excited. Jonah spun the lid and let it click shut, a rhythm that joined the crickets and the distant hum of the highway. He asked me about Iris the person rather than Iris the mother. What made her laugh in the mornings, burnt toast. What she was afraid of, leaving without finishing. The thing she wanted most, time, which is always the thing and never available in the right size. I told him, and it felt like opening windows on a cold day, letting the air make us honest. We drew up nothing formal, no bullet points, as Iris warned, but we tried one thing Iris had written. Invite 2 people who carry unsaid things and let the cottonwood do the listening. Maeve brought a widower named Hector and a teacher named Lila, who spoke to the air like it was an old friend. Jonah didn't guide them. He showed them the windmill, the rocks, the ridge, then left them alone and came back only when their shoulders had dropped. No one cried, or if they did, it was the kind of crying that doesn't frighten birds. That night Jonah said, "I could see this. Not a business. A practice." Iris's phrase echoed, "the right use." Back in Providence, we met with the lawyer. The conference room smelled like paper and polite coffee. We told her we wanted to place the land into a trust with a very specific purpose that sounded naive until it didn't. A place for what can't be said, for quiet retreats, for small workshops where work means listening. Jonah would be co-trustee. The lawyer raised her eyebrows and then nodded, tapping the pen against a legal pad. "You're aware you could sell at a significant profit," she said, because she had to. "We're aware," Jonah answered before I could, and his voice made something in my chest sit up straighter. We signed preliminary documents, ink drying like shadows. I handed Jonah the compass outside on the steps. He weighed it in his palm. "She meant this for you," I said. "How do you know?" "Because she knew I navigate by habit," I said. "You might choose." He opened the lid. The needle quivered, then committed. He smiled a little. "Northish," he said. We walked home the slow way, through streets where trees arched over like old men listening. We didn't talk much, a different kind of not talking than before. When we reached the house, he paused in the doorway of the studio. "I forgive you for the lie about whether the property existed," he said, choosing precision. "I don't forgive you yet for believing I couldn't hold it with you." "That's fair," I said. "I'm learning how to hand you weight without shaping it first." He nodded, the compass heavy in his pocket, the letter folded in his wallet like a thin spine that helped him stand. We returned to New Mexico in late summer with 2 hammers, a box of screws labeled stubborn, and a plank from Iris's studio table. Jonah sanded it, stained it, and carved a small line on the underside. IE for Iris Emery, M for May, and then a V with a line through it, Vara, so the wind's name would be part of the bench even if no one saw it. We set the bench under the cottonwood facing west. The sun laid itself down in pieces behind the hills. Maeve came with a thermos and a story that made us feel like the land had been practicing for our arrival. We didn't say speeches. Jonah placed the hospital bracelet inside a glass jar with a handful of wildflower seeds and buried it under the bench, markerless. I placed the tin box beneath the floorboard of the shack, not hidden exactly, more like woven in. We kept a portion of Iris's ashes, she would have laughed at the measuring, and let them go at the base of the cottonwood, where they turned into a brief dust, then disappeared. "What do you call this?" Jonah asked later, sitting on the bench, elbows on his knees. "Not an ending," I said. He nodded. "A beginning that doesn't pretend it's the first." We listened to the wind count us. We said nothing it couldn't carry. In the months that followed, people came in 2s and 3s. They sat on the bench or walked the perimeter, or lay in the shade and reported nothing, which is how I knew it worked. Jonah kept a small notebook on a shelf in the shack where visitors could write a sentence if they felt like it. Most pages stayed blank. Here and there appeared a line like a breath. I told the wind my father's name. I forgave my sister for leaving first. I didn't say anything, and it was enough. Jonah and I call each other more, We hang up when conversation becomes a performance. We let silence be a room rather than a punishment. Some days he still looks at me like a man who has not forgotten the first wound. I don't ask him to. Forgiveness, I'm learning, is a season where some plants never bloom and you love the leaves anyway. I keep Iris's jacket by the door and the compass in a dish. North is still a choice, repeated. When the house is too loud with my own thoughts, I step outside and listen for Vara coming up from wherever wind begins. Sometimes I think I hear Iris laugh in the movement of the maple leaves. Sometimes it's only the neighbor's dog. I accept both. I still haven't answered every question Jonah might have. I don't rush. The land waits, the way it always has. When we're there together, we sit on the bench until the shadow reaches our shoes and then our knees. He'll lean forward and say, "Hear that?" I'll nod even if all I hear is my own breath finding a steady cadence beside his. I didn't mention the land after my wife's funeral because I was afraid of what the truth would ask me to be. Now the asking is daily and quiet and mostly manageable. It sounds like, bring water, sweep the floor of the shack, be honest before you're neat, let the wind measure without correcting its math. I'm not finished. Neither is he. The cottonwood doesn't rush us. We promised in writing what the wind told us. We won't sell. We'll wait for the right uses to arrive on their own feet. We'll keep a chair for Iris at dusk, a place where our unsaid things can sit without becoming weapons. When we lock the door, the needle in the compass trembles once and then points, patient as a hand reaching across a table. Before you go, I need to hear from you. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments because your perspective might change how someone else sees their own family. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and click on the next video that's about to appear on your screen. It's a story you won't forget.